In level 1, we will be evaluating absolute value expressions. But first, let's review what absolute value means. The actual definition of absolute value is the distance from a number to 0 on the number line. And distance is always a positive quantity. There's no such thing as a negative distance. So, for example, the absolute value of -3, what that means is the distance from the number -3 to 0. And that is 3 units. So it always comes out to be a positive quantity. The absolute value of +3 is the distance from 0 to +3, which is also 3 units. So when you take the absolute value of a negative, it comes out positive. When you take the absolute value of a positive, it stays positive. Because absolute value is always positive because it represents a distance. So in general, the absolute value of -a is going to be positive a, and the absolute value of a would be a. Everything that comes out of an absolute value comes out positive. In level 1, we will be evaluating and simplifying absolute value expressions. This is review, so feel free to put me on pause and try this on your own, and then check how you did. But for this first one, there's kind of two options for how to do these. You can do it in your head, by hand, showing work, following order of operations. But the other option is to plug the expression into your calculator using the absolute value button. And I'm fine with either. So I'm going to show it by hand, but if you are comfortable just plugging it in your calculator and doing it that way, it's fine too. So for this first example, I'm going to simplify inside the absolute value first. And following order of operations, I would multiply before I subtract. So I get 3 minus, and then 5 times 7 is 35. And then I would subtract inside the absolute value. 3 minus 35 is negative 32. So I get 2 times the absolute value of negative 32 over 4. And now I'm ready to take the absolute value of negative 32. And absolute value always comes out positive, so this is 2 times positive 32 over 4. Oops, that was a negative 2 out front. And then I multiply negative 2 times 32, and we get negative 64 over 4. And negative 64 over 4 is negative 16 for my final answer. And the next one, I'm plugging in some values for my variables. So first I'm going to go ahead and write it out. Instead of x, I plug in 2. And then instead of y, I plug in negative 3. And then in the second part, I plug in 2 for x, negative 3 for y. And you could just plug that whole expression in your calculator if you wanted, or if you're going to follow order of operations. I'm going to do inside each absolute value first. First I would multiply. Negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12, so I get the absolute value of 2 plus 12. And then for the second part, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 minus 5. 2 plus 12 is the absolute value of 14. And then negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11, so the absolute value of negative 11. And now I'm ready to take the absolute value of both of those. And the absolute value of 14 is positive 14. The absolute value of negative 11 is positive 11, but I have a minus out front. So I get minus positive 11, and 14 minus 11 is 3. And for the last example, I'm plugging in 25 for x. So I get the absolute value of 12 minus 3 square root of 25 over negative 3. And first I'm going to do the square root of 25, which is 5. So we get the absolute value of 12 minus 3 times 5 over negative 3. And 3 times 5 is 15, so 12 minus 15 over negative 3, which is the absolute value of negative 3 over negative 3. The absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3 on top. Divide by negative 3, and you get negative 1 for your final answer.